Hello friends, this is Lethea from Farm View Creators. Today let's work on the Summer Trio easel inserts from the Rust-Covered Cottage by Christina. This comes with 3 inserts for the easel display. I love all of these summer themed. I'm wishing summer could linger around a little bit longer. We're going to start with the America piece and just give it a good layer of stain with Paint Couture's Van Dyke Brown Antiquing Glaze. I did pre-spray all of the pieces with score lines so that the score lines would stay prominent. It just helps the paint from sinking into those grooves. And then I'm going to make a sticky board and kind of categorize all my pieces based on the colors that I'm going to use to paint them. Notice that I do take those words with the thin letters and kind of hang them off the tape. I don't want them completely on the tape because they are kind of fragile. And then I'm going to work on my backboards for the other two. I'm going to go in with Pacific Pearl, and I'm going to first, I decided to try something new. So I got a little, I guess it's a makeup sponge dauber, and I am using beeswax from Sweet Pickins to put in the bees trail score lines because I really want them to show up. I don't want them to be overwhelmed with paint. And I thought maybe this would help the paint resist there. I've never done this before, so it was a trial run. I am going to still water down my Pacific Pearl paint for the bee backboard, just because I want to make sure that I can see those score lines. I try to keep my brush more parallel with the board when I water it down. On the Sweet Summer, I'm just doing a full coverage layer of that same Pacific Pearl. I do like to work on several pieces at the same time because while I'm working on one, the other can be drying, and it kind of saves some of that dry time. So I've done 2 layers on the watered down Bumblebee board and 1 on the Sweet Summer, going in with that third. Did hit it real good with a dryer. And then getting that second full coverage layer on the Sweet Summer. Painting with the grain. It helps the paint lay down better. And then I'm going to go in with buttercream chalk style paint and barn door and night sky mineral acrylic paints from Paint Couture for the bunting and the words and stars on the America insert. So hitting that with 1 layer, I'm going to get a sponge to do the blue because I am going to go over those words, and the words just do better when you use a sponge dauber. The paint doesn't get gooped up as much in the little nooks and crannies between the letters. Then hitting a second layer. I thought about just doing 1 layer on this because it did have pretty good coverage, but then I decided that I wanted it to be a little bit deeper. So then I'm going to give that a good dry before I get the second layer of the blue. Sometimes on these darker colors, you do have to do a 3rd layer just to get it even, but in this case, 2 was enough. And now I'm going to go in with my barn door. This is my favorite red right now. So I'm just kind of looking at the bunting and looking at the score lines and trying to figure exactly which pieces I want to paint the red. And I'm following those score lines and painting within them. I decided to just go with red and buttercream on the bunting. I could have done blue on the top layer or the bottom layer, but I just decided to go with the blue on the words and the red and buttercream on the bunting. And then I did want to stagger how they looked, so I was checking to make sure I knew what I was doing before I went in and painted the barn door on the top piece of the bunting. I do like how this is a 3-layered piece. It just gives it so much dimension. I'm gonna give that a really good dry. I'm not the best freehand painter, but I'm gonna go back over that and give it another coat. Sometimes I get nervous when I do a second coat when I freehanded because I don't want to mess it up. But it worked out today. So now we're going to go in with the Spanish Sunrise and Basil. And I'm going to start painting the bee, those little pieces, and then the center of that flower. I really like this yellow because it's not so blaringly yellow. That more muted tone is what I like. Then I'm using a sponge dauber to hit the hello words and the background for the bee. And that was with pitch black. And I'm going to go back in with my Pacific Pearl to do the bee's wings. And I noticed that my stars had a little bit of goopy, so I used my weeding tool to kind of pull that out of the stars. And then hit those yellows with a second layer. And going in with the basil on the flowers, the leaves for the flowers. There was just one little spot on each of those groups of flowers that needed a little bit of freehand. And then hitting the watermelon rind and the stem on the flower that goes with the bee. And getting a second layer of that Pacific Pearl. And then I'm going to sponge another layer of the black. And that's pitch black. Now I'm going to go in with both Caribbean coral and garnet on my watermelon slice. I'm going to start with the garnet closest to the rind and then start with the Caribbean coral up at the top. And I just brushed those on, and then I took the brush that I used, my garnet, and just kind of swooshed that around to blend it. Then I wanted it a little bit more coral at the top, so I added a little more and used my finger to kind of mix that. And I hit the little heart that goes with the bee with the garnet, and then I am using the coral on the letters for summer. I did use a brush for this mainly just because it was already had been in the coral, and I was afraid that I would mess up my watermelon if I tried to sponge around it. And for the word sweet, I'm hitting that with the garnet red. Again with a brush just because I'd already used it in that same color. I do prefer to do my letters with the sponge dauber. And I'm going to hit my flowers with Barbados Blue. I love this blue. It's so pretty. It really looks nice with the Caribbean coral. They won't be on the same piece in this project, but I will use them together sometime. And then on my large flower for the bee, I'm going to use Sugar Plum. This is a new color that I've recently gotten. I think it's really pretty, kind of pink purple color. And that flower is double layered. So I'm carefully going around the yellow and the green stem. And then I'm going to go back and hit my coral words one more time while other things are drying. and hit my garnet. I think these colors are pretty together as well. Need a couple places to touch up with a garnet. Getting my second layer on my flowers. Again, this is why I like working on multiple pieces. I don't have to pull out the dryer as frequently because while I work on something else, the other pieces are drying on their own. To me, it just speeds up the process. Putting that second layer on the sugar plum. These Paint Couture paints are so smooth and rich and vibrant. Hitting that really good with a dryer. And then I realized I forgot to do the seeds on the watermelon. So I had to go back and do those with the pitch black. No big deal. And it's so cute. I'm getting that really good dry. And then I'm going to go back to my backboard pieces. I'm giving the bumblebee piece a little bit of a sanding, just again, because I wanted the trail for the bee to stand out. And I kind of wanted that to be more of a muted background than the one for the Sweet Summer. I'm going in with my favorite Debbie's DIY dark wax around the edges, and I'll smudge it through the center just to give it more of a distressed look and to give it dimension. On this one, I will go over the bee's trail, and you can see how well it pops out with that. Just really pulls it out of the backboard. And then I'm going to hit the America stain sign, all the edges and throughout, and smudge it and buff it back if I get too much with my hand. And of course, I'm going to go in with my Paint Couture Dead Flat to take out all that shine and give it a nice protective top coat on all three backboards. It doesn't take much. A little goes a long way with this one, just trying to make sure that I can get all of the areas. I'm going to put those to the side to dry, and we're going to use the dark wax on all of the little pieces. This just adds so much when you take the time to do the distressing. And it does take time, but it's worth it, I promise. Anytime I got the wax too thick, I just buffed it back with my hand. I didn't mind if it got on my fingers and then got on the pieces because that's what I'm trying to do anyway. So I'm hitting all of the little pieces, and I do lift those up to do that. For the words, I will leave them on the sticky board. They are sometimes, especially with those thinner fonts, they can be fragile. So I don't want to lift them any more than I have to. And I'm going to need them to be on the sticky board for the top coat anyway. So I just left them there. Now for my darker pieces, I am going to go in with the Pacific Pearl and a sponge. I did dab it off on my paper, but I'm hitting the edges of those letters so that they can still have that distressed look, but the dark wax isn't going to show up. So I used Pacific Pearl on the bee pieces, and then on the pieces for the America sign, I used the buttercream chalk style paint. And I think it turned out really well. I don't do that very often. Usually I just use my dark wax, but I thought it needed it this time. And then I'm going to hit all of my little pieces with my Dead Flat top coat. Takes out the shine, gives it a very nice matte finish. I do like to do this before I glue my pieces together. Most of the time I will do it before I glue my pieces together, just because I have trouble with it pooling between the layers if I glue like 3 layers together first, and I do not like that. I'm going to give it a really good dry, and then I'm going to dry the backboard. Was that a couple of them were still a little bit damp, so I gave those a good dry. And then I am going to lay my pieces on top of the backboard where they go, just to make sure I like what I have. If I didn't like anything, I can always go back and sand it and work on it some more. It's one thing I love about the Wood Kits. So don't ever be scared to paint them because you can always sand them back and redo them. On that little bee piece, the stripes of yellow fit perfectly around the heart. It's so stinking cute. And then the blue flowers have 2 layers as well as the sugar plum flower. I'm going to go in with my favorite art glitter glue. I love this glue because it gives you wiggle room. If you need to kind of slide a piece around, you do have a little bit of time to do that before it bonds. It also dries clear, but my favorite thing about it is that it does not stick to my fingers. I'm a messy crafter, and if I use any kind of super glue or anything, I will have crusty fingers for hours, and I hate that feeling. So I decided I needed to fit that heart piece together before I tried to glue it down, just to make sure that it was going to lay perfectly when I got it on the bee. I went in and I did all of my multi-layered pieces first, just to give it a little time to set up before I tried to glue it onto the backboard. And then I am adding all the rest of the pieces. So there's the America. And then we're going to get that bee on there. You can still see the score lines even though they've been painted over. So if I wiggle it around, it's because I'm trying to make sure that I'm lining it up with those score lines perfectly. Again, you do have some wiggle room with this glue. And a little goes a long way with this. It also has a larger refill bottle that you can get off of Amazon. So my little 2-ounce bottle or 4-ounce bottle, I can get a much larger bottle and then fill that one up repeatedly. I like that a lot. Not as much plastic waste, in my opinion. And there we have all 3 of them. I love them so much. So let's put them in the easel. Here's the Sweet Summer in the easel, and the America, and then the Bumblebee Hello. I hope you enjoyed watching. Let me know which one was your favorite. Be sure to like and subscribe. Thank you.